I grew up in a quiet suburb in Ohio. The kind of place where the loudest sound most evenings was a lawnmower or kids riding their bikes until the streetlights came on. Our house was a modest split level, with beige siding and a porch that always needed repainting. Most mornings, I'd wake up to the smell of coffee drifting from the kitchen, my dad, already dressed for work in his button-down shirt, tapping the newspaper with his finger as he read the headlines. My mom was a nurse, so she'd often be coming home around the same time I was leaving, her scrubs wrinkled and her hair tied up in a messy bun. By the time I turned 20, my life was simple but full. I worked part-time at a hardware store off Route 23 while taking classes at the community college nearby. My shift usually started around 2 p.m., which meant I had mornings free. I'd wake up, make myself a bowl of cereal, and ride my bike to campus. Classes weren't anything fancy, basic English, intro to sociology, business math, but I liked the rhythm of having somewhere to go every day. After class, I'd stop at the coffee shop across the street for a cheap refill before heading to work. At the hardware store, I knew every aisle by heart. I stocked shelves, cut keys, and helped customers load bags of mulch into their trunks. Some days dragged, but there was a satisfaction in walking home with sore arms and dust on my jeans. The store manager, a guy named Rick, always joked that I could probably run the place blindfolded. I wasn't ambitious back then, but I liked being dependable. My evenings were filled with small routines. On Mondays, I met up with a couple of friends to shoot hoops at the local park. Fridays, I usually saw my girlfriend, Melissa. We'd grab burgers at a diner and then catch a movie at the $5 theater. Saturdays were for sleeping in, and Sundays were always family days. My mom made a big meal. Chili in the fall, roast chicken in the winter, and my dad would pour sweet tea into mismatched glasses. My sister and cousin often came over too, filling the house with chatter, laughter, and the clatter of dishes being passed around the table. I didn't think about it much back then, but those dinners were the anchor of my week. We'd argue over football, tease each other about grades or jobs, and play cards after dessert. Sometimes I'd help my dad fix something in the garage afterward, a squeaky hinge, a loose shelf, and he'd clap me on the shoulder saying, "You've got good hands, kid." Life wasn't perfect. I was broke most of the time, stressed about exams, and constantly driving my beat-up Honda to the repair shop. But it was steady, predictable. I had people who showed up for me, I had plans, however small, and the comfort of knowing that when Sunday rolled around, there would be a plate of food waiting for me at the family table. Looking back, I didn't realize how fragile that normalcy was. At the time, it felt like something I could always count on, like the rhythm of the seasons or the hum of cicadas in July. But it only took one lie, one sentence spoken at the wrong moment, to rip it all away. Thanksgiving was always the biggest holiday for my family. That year, we gathered at my parents' house like usual. The kitchen smelled like roasted turkey and sweet potatoes, and every counter was stacked with pies and trays of food. I spent the morning helping my dad haul folding chairs from the basement and setting up the extra table in the living room. By noon, the house was full. My aunt and uncle, my grandparents, my sister, and a handful of cousins, including Amanda, who was a couple of years younger than me. The day itself felt normal. I carved turkey alongside my dad, carried plates of food to the table, and helped my mom keep the gravy warm on the stove. After dinner, the kids piled into the den to play video games while the adults lingered over coffee. I spent most of the evening stacking dirty dishes, loading the dishwasher, and sneaking extra slices of pie. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. It wasn't until 2 days later that everything cracked open. I was stocking paint cans at the hardware store when my phone buzzed with a dozen missed calls from my mom. When I finally stepped outside to call her back, her voice was sharp, almost panicked. She told me that Amanda had said I'd touched her inappropriately during Thanksgiving. My mom didn't ask me if it was true. She just told me I shouldn't come to the house until things were figured out. I dropped the phone in shock, standing in the freezing November air with customers walking past me. My first instinct was to drive straight to Amanda to confront her. But when I tried calling, she didn't answer. My texts went unread. By that evening, my dad had called too, his tone clipped and formal, saying I needed to stay away from family events for the time being. The fallout was immediate. My sister unfriended me on social media. My aunt left me a voicemail telling me to get help. At work, Rick pulled me into his office and said he'd heard rumors and thought it best if I took some time off. By the end of the week, I wasn't on the schedule anymore. Melissa's parents found out, and within a few days, she showed up at my apartment, tearful but firm, saying she couldn't see me anymore. I packed up what little I had and left my parents' house that weekend. My dad stood by the door as I hauled boxes to my car, not saying a word. My mom tried to hug me, but pulled back halfway, like she wasn't sure if she should. Nobody asked me for an explanation. Nobody gave me the chance to defend myself. I found a cheap one-bedroom apartment near the interstate, the kind of place where the hallway carpet smelled like cigarettes and the laundry room lights flickered. I bought a mattress off Craigslist and set it on the floor. Most of my belongings fit into 2 boxes: clothes, a few books, and some dishes. The first night there, I sat on the mattress surrounded by half-empty boxes, scrolling through my phone. Texts I sent to my family stayed unread. My call to Amanda went straight to voicemail. The silence was worse than yelling would have been. It was like I'd been erased from their lives in a matter of days. At work, I never got my hours back. By December, I was picking up night shifts at a gas station to pay rent. I'd stand behind the counter under buzzing fluorescent lights, watching strangers shuffle in and out, wondering how my entire world had collapsed so fast. All it had taken was one sentence from Amanda, and my family believed her instantly. Life in that apartment quickly shrank into a pattern of survival. The walls were thin enough that I could hear the couple next door arguing late into the night, their voices muffled but sharp. My mornings blurred into afternoons. Most days, I didn't bother setting an alarm. By the time I dragged myself out of bed, the sun was already low. I'd pull on the same hoodie, microwave leftover noodles, and head out for another night shift at the gas station. The gas station sat on the corner of a busy intersection, its neon sign buzzing constantly. I worked from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., a shift nobody else wanted. I stocked coolers, mopped sticky floors, and rang up customers who barely looked me in the eye. The regulars were a mix of truckers, insomniacs, and drunk college kids stumbling in for cigarettes and energy drinks. Some nights, I'd step outside to empty trash cans and just stare at the endless line of headlights streaming down the highway, wondering how many of those people had homes to return to, families waiting for them. Money was tight. My paycheck barely covered rent and groceries. I stopped going out with friends because I couldn't afford it, and one by one, they stopped calling. Melissa blocked me on everything. My car broke down twice that winter, and when I couldn't pay for the repairs, I sold it for scrap and started walking to work. Food became whatever I could grab cheap: canned soup, frozen pizza, discount cereal. I kept empty bottles of cheap whiskey lined up under the sink, telling myself I'd stop after 1 or 2 shots, though I rarely did. The alcohol dulled the noise in my head long enough to get through a shift. The apartment itself felt less like a home and more like a bunker. I taped up blankets over the windows to block out the streetlights and left dishes to pile in the sink until there weren't any clean ones left. Laundry stacked in the corner until I wore the same clothes for days. The only sounds inside were the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional rattle of the heating pipes. Sometimes, when the silence got too heavy, I'd walk down to the 24-hour diner 2 blocks away. I'd sit in a booth with a bottomless cup of coffee, pretending to read a newspaper while watching families and couples come and go. The waitresses learned my name and stopped asking if I wanted dessert. I never did. Holidays passed unnoticed. On Christmas Eve, I worked the gas station shift while snow fell outside. Customers came in wearing scarves, carrying gifts, talking about family dinners. I sold them gasoline and coffee, then went back to sweeping salt from the floor. At midnight, I clocked out and trudged home through the snow, alone. Every week bled into the next. Wake up late, walk to work, clean, stock, ring up customers, walk home, drink, sleep. There was no space for hope or plans, just the routine, the grind, and the weight of being cut off from the life I used to know. And for nearly 3 years, that was all there was. The turning point came almost by accident. One morning, after another long shift at the gas station, I saw a flyer taped to the bus stop. Warehouse hiring, full-time, apply within. On a whim, I rode the bus across town and filled out the application. A week later, I was standing on a loading dock, steel-toed boots on my feet, a neon vest strapped across my chest. The work was brutal at first. 12-hour shifts moving pallets, operating forklifts, hauling boxes heavy enough to leave my arms trembling. But for the first time in years, I felt my body working towards something. I came home bone-tired, collapsing onto my mattress without needing whiskey to knock me out. The steady paychecks meant I could finally afford groceries that weren't just frozen pizza. I started buying chicken, vegetables, even a cheap rice cooker. Cooking simple meals filled my evenings with a purpose I hadn't felt in a long time. With money coming in, I bought a secondhand bike and started riding it to work. At first, it was just a way to save on bus fare, but soon I found myself pedaling further after shifts, exploring side streets, sweating through my hoodie as dawn lit the horizon. The rhythm of pedaling became its own kind of therapy. Around that time, I met a stray cat that lingered near the dumpsters behind my apartment building. She was a scrappy gray thing with a torn ear, skinny but stubborn. At first, I just left scraps of chicken outside the door. Within a week, she was waiting on my steps every evening when I came home. Eventually, I brought her inside, bought a litter box, and named her Penny. For the first time in years, I had something alive waiting for me at home. Feeding her, brushing her fur, watching her curl up on the blanket at the foot of my bed, it gave me a routine that wasn't just about survival. I also started writing. Not big, dramatic things, just a notebook where I jotted down what I did each day, what I ate, what I saw on the bike ride home. Filling pages became addictive. Some nights, I'd sit at the table with a pen scratching across paper until my hand cramped. It wasn't therapy exactly, but it gave me a sense of order. Over time, I cut down on drinking. At first, I still poured a shot or two after shifts, but the exhaustion of warehouse work made me crave water more than whiskey. By the end of the year, the bottles under my sink gathered dust. Life didn't transform overnight, but brick by brick, I built something resembling stability. My apartment was still small and dingy, but I bought a proper bed frame, a small desk, and a bookshelf from a thrift store. I kept the dishes clean, ran laundry every Sunday, vacuumed the carpet once a week. For the first time since the accusation, my space felt like a home. There were still nights when I thought about the past, when memories of family dinners or Melissa's laugh made my chest ache. But more often than not, I focused on the present, the feel of Penny's fur under my hand, the steam rising from a pot of rice, the rhythm of pedaling down an empty street before sunrise. I didn't realize it then, but I was learning how to live again. It happened on a Wednesday evening, just as I was finishing a late shift at the warehouse. I was in the break room, pulling off my gloves and unlacing my boots, when my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. Normally, I would have ignored it, but something made me swipe. Hello? There was a pause, then a voice I hadn't heard in nearly a decade, my mother. She spoke softly, almost cautiously, asking if it was really me. My throat went dry. I hadn't heard her voice since the day I carried boxes out of their house, her arms half raised, like she wanted to hug me but couldn't. Now she was calling me as if no time had passed. I listened as she stumbled through the words. My cousin Amanda had confessed. At a family gathering, she'd broken down and admitted that she had lied all those years ago. No incident had ever happened. She said she'd been jealous, angry, and in a moment of spite, had told the story that destroyed me. I didn't say much on the phone. My mother filled the silence, telling me how sorry she was, how much they regretted not standing by me. She asked if we could meet, if we could start fresh. I ended the call with a flat, "I'll think about it," and put the phone back in my pocket. My hands shook as I packed my gear bag and walked out into the night air. The next days blurred together, but the ripple effects were immediate. My sister sent me a long text, apologizing and begging me to call. My father left a voicemail, his voice steady but cracked around the edges, asking me to come by for dinner. Even my aunt reached out on Facebook, saying she was ashamed of how things had gone. At work, I found myself moving slower, distracted. I dropped boxes, forgot to log shipments. My boss noticed, asked if everything was okay. I just shrugged and said I was tired. At home, Penny patted across my lap as I sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through the messages. Part of me wanted to delete them all and keep my life as it was, quiet, steady, mine. Another part wanted to answer, to see their faces again, to sit at a dinner table that had once felt like the center of my world. I didn't rush to decide. Instead, I stuck to my routines. I biked to work, cooked meals, wrote in my journal. But the past had forced its way back in, no matter how much I tried to keep it at bay. Every time my phone buzzed, my chest tightened. One night, I walked past the diner I used to haunt during my lowest years. Through the window, I saw a family crowded into a booth, laughing over plates of fries. I froze on the sidewalk, realizing how long it had been since I'd had that kind of belonging. For the first time in years, the idea of going back didn't feel impossible. But it didn't feel safe either. A week after the first call, I found an envelope slipped under my apartment door. Inside was a handwritten letter from my parents. My dad's blocky handwriting filled the first page, my mom's cursive the second. They said they wanted me home for Sunday dinner, just like before. My mom listed the menu: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, pie, like she thought the familiar details might bridge 10 lost years. I set the letter on the table and left it there for days. Every time I walked past, Penny pawed at the corner as if she sensed my hesitation. The following Saturday, I got in my car and drove. I told myself I was just going for groceries, but the road took me past my old neighborhood. My parents' house looked almost the same: beige siding, porch light glowing, a wreath on the door. A couple of new cars sat in the driveway. For 20 minutes, I circled the block, slowing down each time I passed. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles ached. Finally, I pulled into a gas station and sat there, staring at the pump until the sun dipped below the rooftops. Then, I turned the car around and drove home. The messages didn't stop. My sister texted pictures of her kids I'd never met. My aunt sent an invite to a family barbecue. Even my cousin Amanda wrote me an email, short, shaky sentences filled with apologies, saying she didn't expect forgiveness, but wanted me to know she was in therapy and trying to change. I read it once, then deleted it without answering. Meanwhile, my routines kept me grounded. I woke early, biked to the warehouse, cooked dinner, wrote in my journal. But everything felt heavier now, like every action carried a question mark. Was I building a future or just running from the past? One evening, I laid out clean clothes on my bed, planning to drive back for that Sunday dinner. Penny sat on the folded shirt, staring at me with unblinking eyes. I stood there for a long time, torn between picking her up and heading out the door, or putting everything back in the drawer and staying where I was. In the end, I didn't either. I left the clothes there, untouched, and sat at the desk instead, writing down everything I'd done that day. Wake up, ride bike, unload truck, cook rice, feed Penny. Normal actions, safe actions. But my hands shook as I wrote, because I knew the decision was waiting. Do I walk back into that house, into the arms of people who left me when I needed them most? Do I forgive, try to rebuild, risk the pain all over again? Or do I keep my life as it is, small, steady, mine, knowing it was built without them, and maybe stronger because of it? For now, the letter still sits on the table, gathering dust.